And they said, well, let us show you, how you got here. And they showed me this review. It was like all of these big monitors like around the room, and they showed me all these different lifetimes. Hello, my name is Ellen Dye, and I guess my claim to fame is that I had a near-death experience in 1985. And I have been integrating it ever since then. And some people say it takes like 10, 15 years to integrate an NDE. In 1985, I was, if anybody is old enough to remember video stores, I had watched movies all weekend. It was a holiday weekend, and it was the Monday of the holiday. And I had watched movies all weekend and had taken the movies back to return them to the video store. And then I was going to go just down the road and go to the grocery store and then go home. So I was going down the road. It was a 2-lane road, and I came to a traffic light that had a crossroad, and there was another car coming toward me on the other side. And as we started to enter the intersection, I suddenly saw that he was veering over into my lane as if to turn in front of me, but he didn't have enough room to turn in front of me. And I had enough time to really understand he's gonna hit me. But then the next thing I knew, I was looking down at the top of my car from about 12 feet up. And it took a second to reorient myself and figure out what I was looking at. But I saw the two cars, head on, smashed into each other. I did not feel any impact at all. I felt no pain. I was just popped out of my body. And I looked down and I saw the other driver walk over to my car, and he reached in my window, and I thought, oh, isn't that nice? He's going to see if I'm okay. Well, instead of that, he turned off my headlights so that he could blame me for the accident, that I was driving without my headlights. So that ended up, I'll tell you now what happened because I'll forget. I did have to go to court. I woke up in the emergency room afterwards, and I was handed a ticket by a police officer for driving without my headlights. And I had to get a lawyer and go to court to defend myself. And for like the whole month while I was waiting to do this, I kept talking to God and my guides and saying, you have to fix this so that I don't have to tell the judge that I saw him turn my lights off while I was hovering above my car. So it all worked out fine. The charge was dismissed, but it was really it was scary to have to go through that and see what was going to happen, because I figured if I said that in court, they would probably commit me to a mental hospital or something. So here I am outside my car, and I did realize, I thought, wow, I'm out of my body. This is what they talk about when they talk about out-of-body experiences. And it was fascinating because I felt like I had been released from like a really tight package. And I was so expanded. I was huge, and I could see in every direction. And it was amazing. And amazing to feel how big I was. And about that time, I thought, shouldn't there be a tunnel of light somewhere? because I had read Raymond Moody's book. And as soon as I said that, it kind of came in from the right-hand side. I heard it with kind of a whoosh. And I felt it. I felt a change in the energy. And the energy in the tunnel was warm and joyful and loving. So I really wanted to go through that tunnel. There was nothing that was going to stop me. But I didn't have to work at it because the tunnel kind of drew me in. And so I went through this tunnel, and the farther I got through the tunnel, the more, the stronger this feeling of love and joy and bliss and just euphoria, the stronger that got. And I was getting really excited because it felt so good. And I got to the end of the tunnel into this kind of atmosphere that was just bright light. And I think if I had had like human eyes at the time, it would have hurt my eyes because it was very bright. But it didn't hurt me in any way. It just, I just wanted to bathe in it because I felt like I had returned home. I felt like I had returned to where I came from and where I was supposed to be and where I belonged. And it was as if, you know, when at the beach, when the waves come up on the sand, and then they pull back and they leave little puddles of water on the sand. I felt like all my life I had been one of those little puddles on the sand that was in a hostile environment where I didn't belong, and I was separated from everything I was supposed to be attached to. And then finally, with this event, it was as if another wave came up and grabbed me and took me back into the ocean. And I felt embraced by it. I felt like I was made of it, that I was part of it and it was part of me. I felt that I had yearned for this, to be here my whole life. And I also realized that in a way, it had yearned for me while I was gone. And that was when I realized it's whatever this environment was, it was conscious. It was sentient. It knew me. And it loved me beyond measure. And I had been brought up with a lot of criticism because I was so different from the people in my family. I didn't act the way they did. And they kept trying to turn me into one of them. And so I got a lot of criticism about that. And here, I was just accepted for exactly who and what I am. I was understood. I was loved. It really was. Euphoria is kind of the closest word I can get because there aren't any words for it. It was so amazingly wonderful. And I felt like I bathed in that for, years, it seemed like, because there's no time over there. And at some point, it was like I heard a commotion, and I looked over, and there were all of these people, and there must have been 50 or 100 people. And I saw all the faces, and I knew who they were. And of course, the first face that I saw was my adoptive mother, who had died when I was 12. And I had 2 grandmothers and 2 grandfathers who had passed. I had a couple of aunts and uncles who had passed. They were all there. And it was this great celebration and this wonderful homecoming, and how much I had been missed. And they said, we're so proud of you, and we've been watching over you this whole time. And at that point, it was interesting because, we human beings judge each other and we judge ourselves very harshly sometimes. And so I was hearing this and I was feeling this embrace of love and acceptance. And I kind of felt ashamed because I thought, I haven't done anything to be proud of. And, I had all of these great ideas of what I was going to accomplish in my life. I was going to be a foreign correspondent for a newspaper and this, that, and the other thing. But, through circumstances, none of that worked out. And I hadn't fulfilled any of the things that society tells us we're supposed to do, like get married, have children, get a house, get a good job. I had a job, and it paid my bills, but it, wasn't a great job, which is what I always thought I wanted to have. So I was kind of like, I haven't done anything to be proud of. And they said, don't you understand? We know that living on planet Earth is very hard. And just getting up every single day and doing your best is such an act of courage and valor. And just by doing that, you are serving humanity and the planet. And I wanted to argue with them because it's like, we're taught that we're really not worthy and we have to accomplish these things and we have to do these things for other people in order to be loved or accepted or okay. And here, there was no judgment except for the judgment that I was putting on myself. There was no judgment at all, just love and acceptance. And I just loved that. And then I saw some other people that I knew, but I realized that I hadn't known them in this current life, but I knew who they were. And oddly enough, one of them was my biological father. And I knew him immediately. I knew exactly who he was. He knew me. Biological grandparents and aunts and uncles, and I knew all of them. And I looked around and I realized that my adoptive family knew my biological family, and everybody kind of started laughing like it was a big joke. And it was like, we planned this, didn't we? All of us got together before we were born and we arranged for this all to happen. And I had read about that, but I had never really understood the concept. But I realized that there was a plan A and a plan B, and there were probably other plans too. But because my biological mother had free will, she might have decided to keep me. And in fact, she did try to get one of her brothers or sisters to be able to take me, but it didn't work out. So, the plan, whether I don't know which one it was, plan A or plan B, that I ended up with my adoptive parents was a plan that we had all participated in. And I was kind of blown away by that. And if I can just fast forward real quick, the fascinating part was 13 years later, I got the records of my adoption open and I found my biological family. And all I found was I found some cousins and I found a brother who had both parents were the same. And I saw pictures of my biological father and my grandparents. And it was like, there they are. It was like, oh my God, it really was true. We planned that, and I saw him, before I ever knew who he was. So I got that. It was fascinating later to get that validation 13 years after my near-death experience. So after I talked to them for a while, I kind of, two things happened. First, I realized that I was getting a little tired of this whiteness, because we live in a 3D world, and we have depth, and we have color, and we have forms and shapes. And so as soon as I thought that, I'd like to have it look more like a landscape or something, it was as if this big hand came up and painted a landscape. And it was like rolling hills of like a park. And over at the end, there was a little forest. But in the park, the grass was very, very, very green. The flowers were colors that we've never seen before, that were so vivid. And there were animals running around. All of my pets from the past, my dogs and cats who had passed, were right there to greet me. And they were all running around having fun. And there were, the birds were singing beautiful songs, and the flowers were beautiful. And everything just seemed so vibrant and alive. It just feels like, in contrast, even the beauty of planet Earth, and there's so much beauty on this planet, this is nothing. This is nothing compared to what's there. And it's like everything on planet Earth is like in black and white, whereas everything there is in, vivid color. And so I realized that I felt like I was supposed to go see somebody else. And I felt drawn to this path that led me down into the woods. And I walked through the woods for a little while and, communed with the trees and things. And I came out to this clearing. And there was a slight hill, and on top of the hill was a pavilion, a gazebo kind of structure. And I could see through the sides that there were beings in there. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm supposed to go see them. So I went up and I walked in, and there were about 12 of them. And they were all very, very tall, and like 12 feet, 15 feet. And I'm 5'4", so I was like, oh, hi. But they just radiated this love that permeated everything there. And for a while, I just kind of like stood in the middle of this circle, and they regarded me, and they embraced me with love and acceptance and affection. And I realized, talk about vulnerable. I realized that they knew every single thing about me. They knew every thought I had ever had, every deed I had ever done or not done, every word I had said or not said, everything. And just as I started to go into that self-judgment again, I realized, again, there's no judgment except what I was placing on myself. They welcomed me home with such joy. They were so happy to see me. It was as if I had been gone for 1,000 years, and they were so happy to see me. And again, they told me how proud they were. And I said, well, that's wonderful, and I'm so glad to be here. But what was all that about? Because it's really nasty there. that life on planet Earth stuff is not fun. And it's hard. And people are mean. And they said, yes, that's true. And I said, why would I have created a lifetime where I was rejected and abandoned and invalidated so much. And they said, well, you were determined to master self-love in this lifetime. And I said, well, but if I wanted to learn self-love, wouldn't I have put myself in a family that really loved me and told me all the things, that I could do and helped me to do those things and find my full potential? And they kind of laughed at me and said, no, if you want to learn self-love, what you create for your life is abandonment, rejection, invalidation, all the things that show that you are not getting love from the outer world or from other people, so that you are forced to find it within yourself. And they showed me an image of when I was about 17 years old, and my father was berating me for something and telling me, oh, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. And I suddenly had this thought, it's like, I'm not any of those things. He's wrong. And, I'm a kind, loving, generous, intelligent person. And I'm not those things that he's saying I am. And they said that in the moment that I had that realization, that was when the spark of self-love happened. So it was like, wow, okay, I don't want to have to go through that again, so I'm glad I got it. And they said, well, let us show you, how you got here. And they showed me this review. It was like all of these big monitors like around the room. And they showed me all these different lifetimes that I had had. And I had been male, I had been female, I had been all different times and all different locations in the world. And I could see the progression of learning these different lessons. And for the big ones, like forgiveness and self-love, it would take many lifetimes to master it. And sometimes I'd be going along fine, and then I'd have a life where I just took several steps backward, and it was fascinating. And I kind of said, well, that's really good. Is life on our earth ever going to get any better? And they said, oh yes, you're all headed to the golden age. And it's all just a matter of what will humans choose, because it's up to you. Humans can change it in an instant if they decide to do that. And I'm like, okay, that's good. And they showed me what that could look like. And I said, that's really nice, but I'm not going back there, and you can't make me. And I'm kind of going, I'm not going back there, and you can't make me. And they're just saying, yes, dear, you don't have to, because you learned it. You finally got it, what you had wanted to learn, and you don't have to go back. And it's like I had already felt all of the worries and concerns and everything that I had carried on my shoulders just fall away as soon as I got to that place. And the idea of picking all that stuff back up was really horrible. And I said, I'm not going back there, because as I said, it's nasty. People are mean. I don't think there's any real love on that planet. And you can't accomplish anything. It's like walking through, hip deep molasses or something. And they said, okay, you can stay. And just as I started to relax into that, they said, but before you decide, let us show you what you could accomplish if you go back. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in the emergency room and a police officer walked over and handed me a ticket for driving without my headlights. And I'm like, what the heck? Why am I here? And the nurse came over and she said, you're in the hospital. You were in a car accident. I said, that's not what I mean. So that was what happened. And to me, the most important thing is what happened after that. For about 5 to 7 years, I was terribly depressed. And I realized later, the depression stemmed from my anger and resistance to being back. I was fighting it. It's like, no, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to be here. And by fighting it, I was creating this depression for myself. And like most people with NDEs, I felt like my whole life just, went up in the air, and I had to start picking the pieces down off the ceiling and putting them back together because my whole perspective changed. And the things that I had thought were important before were no longer important. And other things were important. And my friends were like, what's wrong with you? You used to be so much fun. But I had changed. And one of the hardest things for me was I realized that I had grown up at a time when humor was pretty much based on making fun of other people. It was sarcasm. And that was, if you look at the comedians from that time, that's what the humor was. And I grew up in a household of very sarcastic people, and I was very good at it. And I realized that sarcasm is very hostile and it's mean. And I thought, here I'm complaining about people being mean on the planet, and this is what I was doing. So one of the hardest things for me, besides I left my job and had to find a new one, I lost all my friends and had to find new ones. Everything that I had by which I had identified myself went away. So I had to start from scratch, figuring out who I really was. And that is a difficult process. And I lost my train of thought there. But I had to do all of those things. But the hardest part, I think, was training myself not to be sarcastic anymore. Because I had lived for 35 years being the queen of sarcasm. And I knew that I couldn't, with my new perspective about what's important, that love is important and kindness is important, I knew that I couldn't keep doing that. And so retraining your personality is not easy. It's a long process, just like finding out who you really are. So that was it. I spent, the next several decades kind of putting my life back together, figuring out who I was, and realizing through that process that the whole idea of self-love was something that I was supposed to come back and talk about, because it's very important. And most of us were raised to think that we're kind of worthless and we have to put ourselves last behind everybody else. And they showed me that we have to love ourselves first, because, God loves us. We are beloved. And why wouldn't we love ourselves the same way God does? By not loving ourselves, we're saying that God was wrong. And that was a real revelation to me. So I think we need a lot more self-love in the world. And that's kind of, I feel like that's what they showed me. I never remembered what they showed me I could do if I came back. But I finally realized, and got positioned in a way that I could really talk about that out in the world.